I never didn't believe in Bigfoot. I never believed in it. I didn't believe in it. I never gave it any thought.
They kept wood knocking back and forth to each other, and it was in a pattern.
Barn owls don't typically throw rocks.
I come across these tracks.
Sasquatch is still not on my mind.
Well, welcome back to the Caffeinated Cryptid podcast, everybody. Home to caffeine-fueled conversations, combine incredible scientific perspectives with captivating stories from eyewitnesses that have experienced high strangeness firsthand. I'm your host, Bobby Dizzle, the MC of this train wreck. I've interviewed hundreds of paranormal eyewitnesses, Bigfoot experiencers, and real scientists, and I'm anxious to get this party started. Before we do, I want to invite everyone to join my Facebook group. The link is in the description. It's called Bigfoot and Coffee, the official group of the Caffeinated Cryptid podcast. And here's our guest, Mr. Tobe Johnson and Miss Jill Remensnyder. It was going to be Brett, but he got airport COVID, and the only thing worse than getting sick in an airport is having a toddler in daycare, so we got Jill. Now, Tobe, you are an author of the Owl Moon Lab and a researcher for Bigfoot and Bigfoot Experiencer. And Miss Jill Remensnyder just happened to also be Brett's wife, is an accredited writer of several films and documentaries. Tonight, we've gathered here to discuss works that... Why am I reading this like this? Tonight, we've gathered here to discuss their works on the documentary A Flash of Beauty, Paranormal Bigfoot, in which Jill was writer and Tobe was co-producer. How's it going, fellas? I know we've been talking for about an hour now, and it feels kind of old hat, but thanks for coming on. It's been a heck of a week waiting on it.
That's all right. Hello, Bobby.
Thanks for having us.
And before we get started, I did want to say this. That first documentary, the Bigfoot Revealed, is probably the best Bigfoot documentary that exists. And
Wow.
if it's not the best, it is top 3. It has balance. It starts with the Native American thing, so it takes like that off the table. Because I think that's, as far as like evidence goes, I think the Native American thing is a big portion. Like if you lead with that, like that documentary did, it really takes some of the wind out of the sails of somebody's like, well, just a second there.
Mm-hmm.
Or the bodies, yeah. And the only complaint I think anyone could even have about it is that it doesn't suggest the fact that it doesn't exist, which I think if you're crossing that threshold, you need to get that out of your mind anyway.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
I was just thinking as anybody watching it. That's one of those things, like if you wanted to be like, okay, tell me about Bigfoot, I would say like, you watch this and come out afterwards, because that's got everything. It's got the Native Americans, it's got the experiencers, and it doesn't get into the woo until after the credits, like Iron Man 3. And it's why why is more Samuel L. Jackson on a donut? Like that's
Oh, that's right. It is a little Marvel-esque, isn't it?
Yeah, because it comes back with a guy that looks like Iron Man's buddy.
And
Cheeto.
we got Black Widow with us tonight, so it's all good.
Scarlett Johansson. Let's talk about the paranormal Bigfoot. That goes right in it. And I wanted to hear more about the Arla thing with the guy with the gun.
That would be the Rick Taylor story.
Yeah, Rick Taylor. That's what I was asking about earlier.
Yeah, well, so Arla, who she's featured in both documentaries, but extended experiencer, had her first encounter as a small child, and she just kind of grew up with them around her property, and she just kept a connection. And the area where she lives in eastern Oklahoma, very active area, and so much so that it's not uncommon for people to come out to her property and have encounters and experiences of some sort or other. There's more than one thing going on at Arla's, but Rick Taylor had heard about Arla, and she happened to be holding a drum making weekend get together, and he was really blunt, and not to ruin the whole segment of the documentary, but he's like, I don't want to make a drum. I'll pay the fee. I just want to hang out on your property and see if anything happens. And yeah, he had this moment where he just had to, he's getting frustrated because nothing was happening. And he set out to the woods. He's like, look, I just want to see you. That's all I want. And Arla got tuned in, and she kind of got directed to him, was like, do you want to see them? And sure enough, he had, as Arla said, the experience of a lifetime. Now, one of the things that we don't feature in the documentary, and I'm kicking myself, but if you look on Facebook through Rick Taylor's page, and I know Arla posted it too, he had his audio recorder going during that encounter when they stepped out on the trail, and he saw that. And the large male was making the owl sounds. You hear them, and they're talking about it. It sounds like a 800, 900 pound, owl making noises. But another thing, Arla made it very clear. She's like, they don't want cameras going. You can't be using your camera. And at one point, his camera was actually shut down until she's like, we'll try it again. He happened to have it recording as he was walking down the trail, and he passed by some bushes and trees and whatnot. And I'll be damned if there's a face that he caught on camera.
Really?
Yeah.
I know he said, I don't care nothing about making a drum. I just want to come out there. Care nothing about it. The fact that he knew that he was like packing a gun was astonishing to me, because I've heard so many people say that if you put one underneath like your clothes, you're more apt to have like even just an incidental sighting than carrying like a long gun on your back.
Yeah. I mean, well, look, I'd like to talk about that, the premise of them knowing more than maybe they should, because this gets into the idea that there's something else going on besides an animal, something probably beyond human, right? Because of the predictive knowledge of what they seem to know about people. Now, did they see the bulge on the left hand or right hand side of his hip and then put two and two together? Did he somehow flash a little bit of the gun? I don't think that's necessarily so, because the reports that have come in over the years talk about a precognition ability where they seem to know your intent. You'll hear this in the community time and time again. It's presented through the documentary. This goes into mind speak and telepathy, and them getting inside of your head and asking you certain questions. Rick gets into that, tells him to step away from Arla. I thought that was an interesting moment too, where they basically assume that something negative would happen, I guess, if he was to see them, maybe with a gun. Was that what was your thought on that, Jill?
Well, for my takeaway was, it's like what Rick said. He's always carried, he's former big law enforcement, situation where he's used to having it with them. So he didn't give it a second thought. And I think it was almost just Tobe, you said it just so perfectly, that precog, knowing that your intentions before you get there. And I think they might have it's almost like, you get to the door and the bouncer has to ask, let me see your ID. I got to make sure you can come in. And it's one of those moments. But no, I think they were just doing their due diligence. I mean, they've grown up with Arla, and they're very protective of her.
Okay.
They seem to like his answer.
Right.
Like,
it worked out.
I'm a cop. It's cool. Flash his badge.
Right.
When he said step away from Arla, I thought something was about to happen. Like I got attacked. I'm like, wow.
Yeah, he didn't draw any conclusions in there. I don't know if in the interview that went into more detail, but there was. I thought that was a really interesting comment that he made, and that's certainly something that would be hard to make up that scenario. Why you would think he'd want to be closer to Arla for the protective aspect of it. So it kind of flies in the way of I mean, he's obviously being profiled, right? And here you have the profiler being profiled, which must have been uncomfortable.
And he said as much, Tobe. You know, he said that you know, stepping away from Arla, it was like, you know, like what, taking a step off into the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, he's dressed like he was sticking to her like glue.
Yeah.
How similar is Arla to Robin Haynes? Like they seem like they're a lot of the same stuff. Because I talked to Robin a lot, and I really like her. But when I saw Arla's story, I'm thinking, you know, it gets in, and y'all have Robin on your YouTube channel.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I think they're cut from the same cloth.
Type of person you could talk to for literally like a day and not get tired of it. Different stories.
Absolutely, yes.
I just wonder why somebody, and it reminded me of my Mamaw's friends, Robin and Arla. Like they hung out with the Master Gardeners or something down at the library. It's this sweet old lady that can sew really well for some reason. Like, why do you think like people like that get the privilege of like the cohabituation with the creatures on their property?
I think Tobe touched on it earlier. Intention. Yeah. You can sense intention, and also, I mean, what you put out is what you get back. And if you're living a good life, if you're, you know, trying to help people and you have those good intentions, it's going to come back to you. And I think whether we're talking about Sasquatch, spirit, because there's a lot more than just Bigfoot out in the woods. Yeah. I think
Bigfoot's best case scenario.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, you know, things at other frequencies and vibrations that pick up on that, and they can tell if you're a match or not. And
one of the ladies, they had the orb on her face and heard the growl. I can't think of her name. She was talking about the aura and the energy that you can sense around it. Yeah. And whenever I go, I've been on maybe 2 serious Bigfoot investigations in places that it may happen. I even saw a shadow person once, and a couple haunted locations, and I'll always give like a brief to them. Like I'm like, look, I'm just an observer. I don't mean any harm. I don't have a gun. I have a knife and a flashlight, and that's it. I'm not coming in to expose you. I'm not going to take a picture. Don't hurt me. Just let me see you, possible. I always do like a brief, like over and over, like 4 or 5 times before I even go into the property. So I think the intentions are a big thing. I'll give them a brief. Look, I'm cool. Don't hurt me.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think once they get to know you or mark you, once you're a known force with a clan, let's say, a group, I think you bypass all of this stuff where their initial impression of you seems to stick. It doesn't really seem to waver. So someone like Arla, you know, she was immersed in this because of her grandmother. And I think that initial impression probably got off on a good foot. Doesn't always get off on a good foot. There's a lot of people, and we haven't really highlighted this in any of the documentaries. But some people never have a good feeling about this phenomena. It's a really difficult, bad experience, and they don't want to see it, don't want to experience it again. And so the bow hunter that loved to bow hunt never goes back in the woods. Someone like Mark Parker, who was highlighted in the first documentary, kind of rare, really. Like this is the guy that just like, no, I'm going to get back on the horse. And, you know, he's vacillated back and forth actually because of the documentary a little bit. We've talked about it publicly and privately on our shows. And that's very normal because this is such a, it's such a powerful, odd issue, such an odd reality that this exists at all.
I think some of that, Tobe, has to do with like your support network, you know, your support group afterwards. Like, how are people interacting with you and supporting you after you tell them about your sighting or your encounter? Are people listening to you? Are you being ridiculed? Are you being shamed? I mean, I think it really is a combination of things. One, like kind of where you are personally in your life when you have this encounter. Second, how the people around you are reacting. And also, I think the third component is how comfortable are you to admit that there's maybe more to this world than we know and understand. And I think for a lot of people, I think there's people who they have these experiences and it challenges their paradigm. And it's like having your world flipped upside down. It's like
Mhm.
Richard Mo talks about it. Like, I know what I saw, but what I saw doesn't exist. I thought it was a fairy tale. And
It's
he
not
goes
real.
on,
It's not real.
yeah, and he goes on to say, if I was lied to about this, what else has been a lie? Or what else?
Oh,
What
yeah.
else? Have I been told one thing and it's the other? And so I think that's something to take into consideration also. How willing are you to open your mind to accept it, to explore it, and to admit it happened instead of trying to deny it or push
Right.
it down.
Have either of you ever had the paradigm shift? I know Tobe, you've experienced the creatures like have a sighting.
Yeah. Well, so it's just one of those things where you chase it so long, eventually something happens to the point where you can't unsee it. But so this is, a very fun, mysterious subject matter, but
Definitely.
it can, it has so many tentacles to it. Like it's not just one thing. So you suddenly find yourself, looking for lights in the sky. You suddenly start scrubbing audio and find voices of what sound like the dead. You start meeting interesting people with interesting backgrounds that don't necessarily line up to, someone who's just looking into Bigfoot for just the fun of it. And so all these things go along with the Bigfoot ride. And yeah, so we at the Al Moon Lab, which we highlight in the story, we all ended up seeing something that we can only testify was not normal and certainly not human-like in the way that it moved. Did it come out and say I'm Bigfoot? That's the thing puzzling about this issue is that we're not quite sure what the hell we're seeing. Like people see what looks like an upright standing, undocumented something, but Bigfoot is just kind of elusive. Like we don't know what a Bigfoot really is. I mean, they could be, if they can shapeshift, like Jack, our witness, says in part 2, from a deer into a Bigfoot. What's the real form? Is the energy ball, the orb, the real form? Is that what a Bigfoot looks like? Are they deer? Most of the time. I mean, these are the things that once you start going down this rabbit hole, it's a great campfire discussion to have, but we really don't know. And we can only describe the Patterson-Gimlin footage really, and the footprints left behind and say, well, this fits the profile of this upright human-like primate. But once you know that they're like a magic ninja monkey and that they, will not be quantified or measured, or it's all up to them. Like very rarely do they seem to make mistakes. Like I think they do make mistakes, but I think it's because they come here and they have to go by our rules when they're here somewhat. When they're, jumping through the portal or whatever they're doing, when they're beyond this plane of existence, it's game on. Like they don't have to show themselves. And for some reason they choose to.
I compare the orb travel like hopping an Uber. Like that's when you're on the other side. Like I got to go down to Earth. Let's hop an orb. You want to share an orb? I mean, you got any money? You got to share.
Right.
I will say, definitely, before or at the beginning of the process of making these documentaries, I kept all the stuff in different silos. I had cryptids over here. I had UFO aliens over here. I had like paranormal ghosts and hauntings over here. And there are a couple other little, categories dangling around. But for the most part, I thought everything you kept it neat and tidy. It was its own isolated event. But in the process of this, especially as we get into on the sequel, A Flash of Beauty, Paranormal Bigfoot, there's so much crossover that it just became apparent that it's all connected. And you may not experience it all at once, but when you start talking to enough people, you'll talk to people who, I saw the lights in the sky, the lights in the forest right before my encounter. I had the telepathy. I was, things were teleporting, apporting, appearing out of nowhere. So it's just, I don't know if it's a timing thing or how aware you are to what's going on around you. But, Dr. Simeon Hine, he really paints a picture of how this could all be working together with dark matter and the relic neutrinos. And I'm not even going to try to summarize the whole his whole stance on it, but it's more than just, like Tobe says, it's more than it's not just a big magic monkey in the woods.
That was the portion of the documentary you had to go to the bathroom. I was like, whoa, take a step back.
Simeon made you had to wee.
I was like, whoa, this mug said neutrinos. It's like you start it from Bigfoot to Big Bang really quick.
It's very dense what he has to say. But and sitting around having a beer with the guy like we did earlier this year, Jill, the talking point of it really is that the building blocks of the Big Bang evolved into different choices. We're part of that choice. Think of it more like the well, we don't want to go into the quantum world, but one of the choices that were made in the Big Bang was that we evolved. But this idea of the energy that came off the Big Bang also evolved and has a variable state as to where we're just seemingly just a solid. These things are variable, and they can hither and dither from plasma energy, i.e. swamp gas, to ball lightning, into something that's kind of like a cold fusion reaction and turn into like a physical state. The interesting thing about this is that Simeon brings it all home for us. Like there's something that happens when these things change from one state to another. And people haven't put these puzzle pieces together, but there are signs that you're about to have a Bigfoot experience or a cryptid experience. And these lights are a part of that, but so are these damn sounds. And so,
or lack thereof,
or lack thereof. Yes, like a vacuum sound. But if you go into a haunted house and you hear about the 3 raps at the door, the knocking, these are also things that Bigfooters have talked about. No one's really seen a Bigfoot. No one's recorded any 4K GoPro footage of a Bigfoot doing a wood knock, but they have recorded the sound of wood knocking and popping. Let's go real quick back to Rich Germeau, the police officer that had an encounter that says, what I'm seeing is not real. Rich is having these things happen at his house in the last week. And at first I thought, well, he's a neighbor of mine. We'll just go down there and we'll record for a week and see what happens. But it's very reminiscent of what happened to us, very reminiscent of what other people have said. And we're talking about giant sounds very close to the microphone that sound like wood popping or something being chucked at a piece of wood. And you just have to wonder, like, okay, so I could misconstrue that as rock throwing. It could be a lot of different things. However, it's very common for it to be uncomfortably loud. And that's what he's having, is these huge wood poppy sounds and sightings and smells and all of the stuff that goes along with it.
He's having those sightings currently?
Yes.
Like
yeah.
still?
In fact,
wow.
In the last week, it actually stopped. And when we put the recorder out, it stopped for 2 nights and then it waited a night. But before that, three nights before that, his daughter saw a black figure run across the road. Strange things are happening in and around the house. His father lives on the property. The window was slapped. So there's stuff happening in and around the house constantly, just given where they live. But this just goes back to you talk about Dr. Travis Taylor, who talks about the hitchhiker effect and skinwalker ramp. These are the things that happen when you go Bigfooting. They shouldn't, especially if we're talking about a primate. It shouldn't be linked at all. But we're not talking about just a primate. We're talking about a type of spirit form or land spirit.
I've heard tons of the hitchhiker Bigfoot thing before. Like if you don't gift them, they'll come to your house. You gotta keep feeding. You gotta keep feeding the beast. Yeah,
that's
now you saw the cloaked one at the Owl Lab. Is that where that was? Did you try the witch butter? What is the witch butter? Like you just left.
Well, you put a little on your toast, man. God dang
it! What the hell is that? Like, oh, it's just witch butter. Everybody knows what that is. Wait, what?
Well, I mean, this gets into.
Is it something that occurs in nature? Like I've lived in the woods my whole life and never heard of witch
Black
butter.
witch's butter is just it's a mushroom called Exidia glandioso. It looks like a little slimy orange mushroom or fungus. You find it on dead logs. It looks like jelly. But this was a black variety, and it was left in a strange location on top of, like, we'll just call it a gifting altar.
Yeah.
And it was an answer to us looking for a treatment for COVID. And it cures upper respiratory disease. It was also an answer to the question of, can we meet? It's also a way, if you ingest it, to have a psychogenic experience and meet the land spirits. Yeah. So, this gets into like, is this just Bigfoot leaving these things out? No one saw Bigfoot leave the Black Witch's butter, but we live in interesting times where these conversations aren't meant to be had for some strange reason. Maybe more so now because of the UFO stuff, but it's like before the big bomb, the big bomb in 1940s happened in New Mexico. We were all kind of on the same page that there were land spirits. We called them different things, angels, demons, stuff like that. There was the spirit world. But then when we kind of became gods, after the bomb, we kind of forgot all that. Like, it wasn't cool to talk about anymore. And I think we're just now wrapping our mind around the fact that that stuff still occurs. Like, what are these creatures? And that's still a question that we all have. We don't really try to answer it in the documentary as much as we just explain, hey, this is such a mystery. We're not quite sure how deep it goes.
And that's one of the reasons we're doing these documentaries, why we're posting the full interviews on our channel, is because we're trying to help people answer questions they have. And we also think that by sharing the information and kind of removing the stigma, the people we're talking to they're normal people. These are educated people who are having real experiences. For lack of better words, they're not crazy. And what we're hoping to do is give people the confidence to come forward and share their stories. So this isn't like the weird kind of, behind closed door conversation that you don't want other people to know about. It's like, let's remove the stigma. Let's make the paranormal normal and try to figure out the mystery.
And wasn't it Mark Parker that said, he was the guy in the t-shirt with the green graphic on it, wasn't it? And
he's a bow hunter.
Yeah. Who was the one that had the two big prints at the end, the cast? I can't think. I get them mixed up.
The first movie, that was Mark Parker, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was talking about he's seen pictures that no one will ever see because, and like I told you, I've been on a couple of little outings and I've seen pictures he was talking about. I'm sure you have too. And people have this evidence that could shatter, paradigms a little bit, just cultural norms, and they don't show them because of ridicule. Just like people have these things, like they just show you pictures of it. Well, that's that. I can't believe that's not public or mainstream.
Right.
They just.
Well, there's also, I think Mark says it. Mark just, I'm gonna kind of mince words a little bit, but to summarize, he's like, and what if I have the pictures? If I have the evidence?
Yep.
Show it, and then what? Because people are already gonna make up in their mind that it's not real. This, that, and the other. And if he knows it's real, who's he need to prove it to? If he knows. And on that note, Brett and I just got back from a week-long, filming in Alaska, and we saw photos that were amazing. But it was this idea of like, well, why do I need to show them to anyone? This was in my backyard. I know what I saw. Then what? What's the point of having to prove to other people what I know? I know what I saw. So what are we doing here?
It's just so crazy to me that the evidence is out there, but people, the society and like the cultural paradigm, I keep saying paradigm, is that it doesn't exist. And so if they show them, it doesn't matter what's on them. They're just like, well, that's a Photoshop. AI now. AI is everywhere. So that's like the go-to for stuff nowadays. But yeah, this kind of stuff you see, like what was the big thing when game cameras came out? Like, surely this will prove the existence of Bigfoot, and it didn't. But there are some game camera footage of them out there. They just don't show them. And the ones they do show are kind of the ones that are just kind of hokey.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, why are Bigfoot photos and UFO photos, a lot of them so blurry? Is it the same phenomena? Is there a distortion happening? See, some of the best UFO photos I've seen have a pixelation around the edges of them, almost in a box form. And that looks like a cut and paste Photoshop thing to the the novice, but I don't think so. I think this is the reason why this photo is probably a little bit blurry. There's something going on, a field of energy, a power source. And Bigfoot, I think, suffers from the same issue. They're not only camera shy, they're not really good at getting their photo taken because of what's coming off them. And that's why we really emphasize audio, because there seems to be Timothy Renner is a podcaster, and we used to joke on his show, Strange Familiars, that we don't have permission to take photos of them, really. I mean, you can squeeze off a photo, but it's not like taking a picture of a rare animal. We don't have anything really but the Patterson Gimlin footage I mean, that really is it, right? Like we get a full appreciation for the physicality of a living, breathing female Sasquatch, which the female part is super rare, right? Like that's why it's not a hoax, in my opinion. No two cowboys in the woods are making up a monkey costume and adding breast to it in the 67. The original Grove Wild. So it didn't make any sense at all. But just getting, we tried. A lot of people have tried, right? But then if you want to get close to the phenomena, if you're just like, okay, these are a group of really bashful people that don't believe us. They don't trust us. They don't really want anything to do with us when we're awake. They only want to deal with us on their terms at night, like super inappropriate hours of like 2 a.m. And this is when they're going to deal with us. And if you can just admit that, like that's the thing, is you have to admit you have a problem. And we have a problem right now thinking that we're going to try to prove this. It's just game on for them. They've made a fool of us for years. And this is this is I don't have this burden anymore of trying to prove it anymore. That's what's so cool about Brett and Jill, is that they get it. Like they're making a film to make an inventory of really important cases. And they've done it in a way that nobody else has done in a Bigfoot documentary. They're the only camera crew that I've ever heard George Knapp compliment on a Bigfoot documentary. And if people don't know George Knapp, like he's our guy, right? And he said incredibly glowing things about this documentary last time we talked to him. And I think it's because of the cinematography power, the caliber of the witness, and the fact
no sensationalism, no Zach Bagany
too, right? Like we're in a time right now where this conversation is actually being tolerated. It wasn't tolerated this way back in even the early 2000s. Now, because of this UFO stuff, right, Jill? It's like now people are just like, okay, if they're lying, like they said, if they're lying to me about this, what else have they been lying about? And by the way, we're ready to hear the whole truth.
Yep.
Yeah, I just think, there's a level of seriousness that the subject deserves. And that's what we're trying to do, is to, treat it with dignity, with respect, and not just for the subject, but for the people going on camera as well. This isn't a joke anymore. So
now I'm sure you've done more historical research on it than I have. Was it always thought to be a monkey, or did that just get shoehorned in by something along the way?
I think
you got the wild man back in the day,
I think this is just my opinion. Just like shooting from the hip on this one, I think that was the closest thing that we could compare it to.
Yeah.
I mean, the Native Americans, like in their history, they interacted with them. They were well aware of the Sasquatch, the forest people, Sabe. But when we arrived and moved west and started having sightings and interactions, it was like, well, what's the closest thing that we can compare it to? Like a wild man, a big hairy guy, a giant, an ogre. And then like a monkey. So we're just trying to, or people, not us, but people were trying to, just describe it the best way they could. And I think that's where, the path of least resistance, like, what is it? Oh, it's a forest monkey of North America.
The great North American ape, they call it, the hidden. I can't remember who called it that. It seems like you get laugh emojis anytime you deviate anywhere from it's just a hidden monkey, hidden ape. You get your laugh emojis.
But that's when the bar closes and these guys are sitting there on a campfire, it's a whole different conversation, Bobby. These guys are all saying that this thing outsmarted them, outclassed them at every turn. The story's super weird. They'd never talk about it during a PowerPoint or a conference because of all their peers. And it's just like, those are dwindling numbers. Like, I get apers periodically that call me once or twice a year and they want to talk about it. But I don't know why some of them trust me, because it's just like, well, maybe because I don't judge. I am kind of judgy about it just for the fact that they've lied all these years, a lot of them. But the ones that, I've been out in the woods with, we have a friendship, even though we're totally different on different pages with the whole thing. And my hope is that eventually, they'll affect their little sphere of influence and bring the crazy back home with them. And so that's what we're trying to do with this doc, is just bring the crazy back home, baby.
And I think it's happening. I mean, on our YouTube channel, if you start reading through the comments, a lot of people will talk about, I was a skeptic. I thought it was a undiscovered North American primate of some sort. And I thought X, Y, and Z and blah, blah, blah. I'm very scientific and this is a zoological specimen. But then there's and then it happened to me. Then I experienced the orbs. Then I experienced the mind speak, or I saw it disappear. So many people saying, I know what I saw. I'm completely grounded. I'm a hunter. I watched it disappear before my eyes, and not just go camouflage in the trees and bushes, like literally just kind of dematerialize. So people are starting to talk about it.
A lot more people seeing the cloaking that you're discussing. A lot of people see that. They get a giant headache and it cloaks. I don't know what the headache thing.
I haven't heard the headache thing. People get headaches and then they see it cloak.
Well, not coincide, but I'm saying they'll get a headache when they see it and they'll see it cloak. It's not something that happens one begets the other. It's just some of the things that happen when they're around them.
Okay.
Loss of time, disoriented.
Yeah.
Yep.
Where are you at on tree structures?
We also hear about that though with people who have ghost encounters,
same
UFO
thing.
stuff. It's
it seems to all be under the same umbrella once you get down into it. You could almost just call it, because I don't even call it like Bigfoot anymore. I just call it high strangeness.
Yeah.
I kind of pulled it back, and my symbol's still that. Right. You get people that see one thing and it's not even like, what's his name with the come on. The guy with the mullet. Come on.
Jack.
Yeah, Jack. I'm looking at somebody else over here. But yeah, he saw the deer that shapeshifted.
Yeah.
And how many times has somebody been around a deer and the deer is something else and that happens? You don't know.
And his video just we're talking about that off the air, but his video just dropped on the Flash of Beauty YouTube channel. So if you haven't seen a Flash of Beauty, you could start with checking it out on the YouTube channel and check out Jack. What's Jack's last name? Does he just go by Jack?
Jack Sackerson.
Yeah,
it's just under Jack.
Yeah, so he's the latest view, and he goes into deep.
He's interesting.
He is, and he's a great storyteller. Like that film is, it's kind of.
He's a character.
He really makes that film. Him and TJ's opening sequence is kind of hard to beat, and then Jack comes in, and Jack just looks like he's at a central casting for Amazing Dude. And anyway.
Now, how far away? How much time have you spent with Daryl Adams at his shop once he brought home the knees, so to speak?
Well, we're actually about ready to go in the woods together. He moved to Oklahoma shortly after all that happened, but he's still, the phenomena pulls you back. And so here he is in Oklahoma, right next to Arla, by the way. And here he's coming back to Oregon, a 3.5-day drive to go down there for a couple weeks. And so we'll see each other. We'll talk a little bit in the woods, I'm sure. But, Daryl, he was a retired contractor and was just looking for a hobby. His brother was a Bigfooter and said, well, why don't you, you always saw ghosts when you were a kid. You probably have good luck going Bigfooting. It turns out that there seems to be a link, at least in Daryl's case. If you're a witness to the supernatural, you're kind of a magnet to it, in this case, Daryl is, at least. And so did the phenomena happen? Did all the stuff happen in Cottage Grove because Daryl's a magnet? Boy, it was already happening there, because as soon as he moved on site, I'm like, oh my gosh, you moved to a hot spot, bro. And he was just like, yeah, I'm kind of a magnet too, so we'll see how it goes. And
when he said the biology,
yeah, he just kind of like, yeah, we got it going on.
And
he
happens.
wasn't like, he really did. Like, I'd never seen anybody actually live up to the standard that they were a magnet for it, but this guy actually is. It had nothing to do with me.
Do you know if he's had a near-death experience at all, like when he was younger?
Well, I would be surprised if he seems like he'd probably been struck by lightning.
He was.
Was he?
You've heard that story, haven't you?
I don't remember. There's so many stories. What's that one?
So, as Daryl told us, when they lived out in Oklahoma, he was out. What was he doing? He's like shooting at not armadillos, maybe like prairie dogs or something, digging up his yard. And he was out there during a storm. I can't remember exactly what happened, but he was close to a tree or to a pole or a wire or something, but he did get struck by lightning.
Really?
Or he experienced the effects of something very close to him being struck and being collateral damage. But he mentioned that in one of our interviews, just very matter of fact. And that's what's so great about Daryl and his experiences. It's just so matter of fact about it. It's just like, I saw this, I saw that, I heard this, and don't forget that. And all of it was happening at his property.
That was crazy. I know when he said when he heard, you might have said it, Tobe, but if you bring biologic matter home, it starts the floodgates are open. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like there's truth to that. Mel Skahan, the Yakima native, talks a little bit about that as well. And, there seems to be consequences for it to some degree, as far as you bringing your work home with you. I know the guys at Skinwalker Ranch talked about this. Lou Elizondo, right? The big whistleblower, the book that just came out, Imminent. He talked about his work coming home with him. And after he left the program, they quit seeing green orbs. And his wife wasn't having it. Bigelow of Bigelow Aerospace, part of the reason I think he left, he alluded to, was the fact that his wife was sick of him bringing work home with him. And this same stuff, this half-life effect of the phenomena latches on to the host, and it comes home and it deals with people on a psychic, supernatural, spiritual matter. We've had people show up at environments like the Al Moon Lab, and they find crazy stuff at their house happening after they leave. So you don't have to be at these places very long. You go to a place like Skinwalker Ranch, even Bluff Creek, right? Like, I'm sure if you go to Bluff Creek, there's something happening in and around that area that is psychically charging there to be continued activity, because there's still activity that goes on all around that area.
Yeah, the reason I asked about his near-death experiences, I've had a lot of people, and most of the people that have experiences have said that something happened to them when they were younger. Bad car wreck, struck by lightning. One guy got hit with an IED in Iraq.
Oh gosh.
He came home and started experiencing them. So it seems to be once the veil is punctured, kind of like scar tissue on the veil, all of a sudden you're a candidate.
Well, even Brett, the director, I didn't know. I thought Jill was the only gifted one in the crew, but Brett seems to have this you know, he's very humble about it, doesn't talk a lot, but Jill, he does seem to have an ability to pick up on this stuff that we haven't really tapped into. Is that before the Bigfoot thing, or is the Bigfoot thing brought it out?
I think it's brought it out. I mean, he's always had really good gut instinct, so to speak. He's great in casinos. I'll tell you that. We'll be walking, all of a sudden he will deviate, and he'll just stare at you and put like $1 in a slot machine and like win $100. It's a
helpful psychic.
So his abilities are wonderful.
He's not counting cards, is he?
No, not yet. But so he definitely, I think this has kind of made him more aware of it. And I would dare say that a lot of people who've experienced this on more than just a flesh and blood level, it does raise your awareness. You are more tuned in. You're more aware of following your gut, listening to that little voice in your head, and paying attention to the synchronicities.
Right.
I know once you get one, you get a lot more after that. Even if it's just a campfire pebble. Does it? Have you ever heard the comparing the phenomenon to the Fae from Scotland and Ireland, and how the phenomenon lie on top of each other, almost the same thing? You got what's the one thing you say to a fairy when you good luck, knock on wood, that kind of thing. Like it's all the same. And like if a fairy,
consequences for leaving them food too, fairies in particular.
I got a whole episode from a guy who did a bunch of research on it, and I was flabbergasted, for lack of a better term. Like, what? This is the same story.
Well, I know that Sarah Lemos, who was a psychic, she had a show on the Travel Channel. She held one of the hairs that we extracted and did a psychometry reading. And she was totally skeptical about the whole thing, but she felt good about doing psychometry. And that was the word she brought up. She goes, this thing has like Fae energy. I'd never heard anybody describe Sasquatch as being a fairy, but she was just like, whatever they can do, this thing can do, except it has this kind of, she says it has an uncomfortable kind of holiness to it.
Yeah, it's the same legend.
Yeah,
it's tit for tat, and you know, if they say if a fairy gives you something to eat, you don't eat it because you'll become their slave, and whatever they give you turns into leaves. I'm like, what if that's where the bodies go after they don't need them anymore? They just turn to leaves, turn to plant matter. Yeah, I mean, hey, when I found that out, it like opened everything up. I'm like, well, this is so much more than you could ever imagine. Of course, y'all did this documentary, and you know more so than I do about that, but it's just one thing begets another, and it's just a cavern of crap. Anything could happen.
Well, one of my big takeaways is as soon as I think I might have it figured out, I just have more questions. I leave knowing less than when I started, because I'm just like, well, wait a minute. If this is happening, then I have to take all this into consideration. It's like the rabbit hole. Not only does it go down deep, it also takes a lot, twists and turns.
I was trying to make my cover of my group to be a murder board that goes from Bigfoot to everything else, because everything's linked and doesn't make any sense why. It's like you're trying to find a serial killer, and like Bigfoot's in the middle, but why is the Loch Ness monster in here? And how come Gigantopithecus only found the teeth? You say the only thing that proves Bigfoot's real is Gigantopithecus, but you don't have a body of that either. So you're full of shit. I woke up in the middle of the night with that epiphany one time. I'm like, wait a minute, they don't have a Gigantopithecus body either.
Well, the fossil record's pretty incomplete for it to be accurate. There's a lot of guessing that goes on, but academia is just so full of it. And this subject matter could be taken more seriously if people were honest about the kind of stuff that they don't already know. But there's just this air of importance because of the academia situation and the scholarships and the tenure and all of the stuff and the pomp and
lose that funding.
And the funding. Yeah. See, that's a big one, right? Like the funding is a huge one. And, I myself don't have to worry about, funding being yanked out of me because of what I'm looking into. It's just a passion project. But yeah, It's something that
This
maybe
fella here is
eventually someone like Dr. Simeon Hine is kind of like our Dr. Meldrum. He's kind of our anchor, weighing down the science, as to where Meldrum has been like the anchor for the morphology of understanding the primate nature of what's going on here. Simeon is kind of like, he's our Meldrum, for lack of a better way of putting it.
He's definitely up there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the next year or two, we're going to see more people following or coming out to support like what the science that Simeon's talking about in connection to the subject.
Well, we've reached our 45-minute goal here. Congratulations, you made it. Didn't check out or anything. But I wanted to ask a thing about the first documentary it was the second one, the lady with the sketchbook on the tree. Can you explain that scene? I went back and watched it 3 times. I'm kind of smooth brained. I didn't really understand what she was trying to say, and I might have just been like doing something else.
Well, I'll give it a go. Basically, Marcia was talking about, so she goes out into the forest with her sketchbook and she sketches. And one day she didn't have her sketchbook with her, but she had this epiphany about how sometimes we only find one footprint. There's like 1 or 2, and then they just disappear. And it was that maybe where they're going is it's kind of like a lapse between the 2 worlds. Like we're stepping into their vibration and their frequency, and that's why we're finding them, or vice versa. And she's like, if only I had something to write this down with. And just shortly down the trail, there was a brand new little notebook waiting for her. Like someone put it there, and she tried to discount it, but she's like, no, I asked the question, I got the answer. And it kind of circled back to, she talks a lot about, the attitude and intentions you take in the forest is what you're going to get back. If you go out there expecting to slay the dragon, you're going to find a dragon. But if you go out there with respect and come in peace, basically, that's going to be greeted and reciprocated.
Ooh, and Tobe, I was telling you about me getting the mysterious notepad that I didn't ask for.
Right.
And that scene, like, really, I don't know if you were on, Jill, but I was telling Tobe when he first came on about how I've been in a manifestation lately. And I'm getting like wild things happening. One example was I looked into a locker last week to look for a notepad at work. I was just doing it silently, didn't say anything. And because I was going to go do a little project. And I couldn't find it. I closed the thing. I turned around. Dude walks up and said, "Hey, do you need a notepad?" And hands it to me. I was like, and then that scene on that documentary came in. I'm like, wait, what? Like it was kind of like a Birds Before Land kind of thing that happened.
Yeah. Kind of linking me. Receive.
Yeah, it was kind of linking me to the documentary, like a double sign kind of thing. Like that's why I wanted to get. I pretty much got the gist of it. You pretty much explained what I thought it meant, and I'm glad that you did, because I was like, okay, what am I supposed to get out of that? So yeah, that kind of freaked me out. That's why I wanted to elaborate, because it happened to me, and then I saw your documentary, and it happened to the lady there.
And Bobby, we'll be putting out Marcia's full interview very soon. I'm not sure where in the lineup it comes next, but I'll speak to the editor and see if we can fast track to get Marcia's interview. Oh, yeah.
Well, don't make an editor mad, because they'll ruin everything for you.
It's Brett.
Yeah, they're like kicking. Yeah, okay. Never mind. I said they're like kickers. They might get the yips, mess everything up. Let me check the comments, see if we got any questions here, and I'll let you guys go. Get back to, you can tend to the guy that needs chicken noodle soup. So Joe Torrey, documentarian as well. Are there other cryptids that are reported to have mind speak?
Scott Pace out of Louisiana has a tremendous encounter story of where he had mind speak with a Bigfoot and a dogman at the same time. Is like a 3-way conversation where the dogman was like, "Put down your gun, I'm coming for you," and the Bigfoot's like, "No, leave him alone, it's okay." And meanwhile, Scott's like, "I'm just using the scope to get a look at you." And he's like, it was the craziest thing. But after that really kicked off a lot of experiences for him. And I'm sure his encounters all over YouTube. If you look up Scott Pace and the Bigfoot Dog Man, yeah.
Name sounds really familiar. You get in these rabbit holes and you watch all these interviews, you forget the names, and you look at him like, oh, I've watched that story for 10 years. I know all about that guy. Let's see. Jason Lee says, are you familiar with Mark Burton's story? The missing 411 hunted burial Ohio with the cloaker is very interesting. Mark Barton. I don't know. I know I've heard the missing 411 one, but not about who the specific name.
Was that the woman who was up in the hunting blind?
But that's not the right name associated with that woman. I don't know who Mark Barton is, but I know the missing 411 the hunted ended with the cloaker scene, right? And they had the UFO sighting on the football field around the same time.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Mark Barton was the Bigfoot hunter.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. No.
What about the elk hunter on Pallades UFO one that got sucked up with his elk?
Yeah, I've heard I've had witnesses talk to me about seeing Sasquatch in proximity to UFOs. One of them was a diehard flesh and blood guy. And he said, away from the camera, of course, he said, I find it really hard to discount what my friend said he saw on Mount Hood. And I said, well, what did your friend see? And he said, well, he says that he saw a Sasquatch get lowered down in a tractor beam. And he had a tough time because he really liked this guy. Now, this was a flesh and blood aper dude. But let's go back to Skinwalker Ranch, right? Like they describe seeing a primate like humanoid walk out of an orange hole in the sky. What is that? This sounds a lot like what Adam Davies and John Carlson described in Soha. They see a red circle open up over a mud puddle at Dark 30 in Southern Oregon, and they see primate-looking little things interacting in a red circle. So these stories go on. They're said by people that don't want anything to do with it too. Like these people don't want to go on camera. Adam Davies never wanted to talk about this encounter that he had. I'm sure that the guys at Skinwalker Ranch probably never wanted to talk about Bigfoot, but there's Bigfoot stuff happening in Utah all around Skinwalker Ranch that nobody really knows about or talks about because it doesn't fit the show's narrative.
I get to meet Adam Davies in January. Kind of pumped up about that at Greg Ogle's premiere.
Oh, perfect.
Greg's going to give him a special gift from the South.
Is that what conference is that at?
It's Greg's premiere for his. It's going to be at a theater down in Central Alabama.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
It's going to be a big time. We're going to have popcorn.
Oh,
so what do you think the government knows about these things?
A lot.
Because I saw there was a couple of clips in the documentary, but it never fully took the turn. I was like, come on.
Since we finished the first two documentaries, we've been approached by a lot of people with interesting stories and information with key pieces that check out other people's stories. And there's details that would be very strangely specific for people to be making up that are crossing over with other people's encounters that don't know each other. So yes, I think there's a lot more to the story. We're trying to wrap our head around the best way to share that information, and that's all I can say right now.
Yeah, what gets me is, I think it was on the documentary talking about sometimes the armies had to take them out, special forces, for areas when they're bothering people. But then you get people like you and I, that have our equipment that's available to civilians, and the only thing we can get is little flashes and FLIR sometimes. But what is the government using that can bring these suckers out and they won't get away from? Like, what kind of 50 years from now technology do they have that we don't know about that can make them like not disappear? Like, is it like Looper with Samuel L. Jackson again that I'm second time I referenced him in this podcast? Like they go to cloak and all of a sudden like, oh hell no, and they get them in a net like on Ghostbusters. Like, what are they using? Like, how come the Army can do it but we can't? Yeah, like they're doing something because we got technology. Everybody uses relatively the same stuff. Some has more experience, expensive stuff, but like they've got to have something that gets them to not disappear, to be able to take them out and find them.
Yeah,
we've heard stories, but it's above my pay grade to know all the details.
Well, figure it out.
I mean, so the camera crew, the production team has all been paid a pretty big compliment by people that look at this at the level of A-tip. If you go to FILMMAKER, you can meet really interesting people. And some of the people connected to groups like A-tip have said some interesting stuff about Simeon Hines' work. They said it publicly to Brett, the director, and said that the science was right. That whatever, wormhole that we're describing, and Simeon's getting to, these edges of science, as Tom Powell says, the fringes of knowledge, we're going into territory where we're defining the terms as we know them, and we're naming them as they happen because they don't exist yet, or at least we don't know that they exist. There's an interview that we did with the late great Henry Franzoni, and he describes a type of hidden science that has been compartmentalized and stowed away from human knowledge, right? And this is the kind of math and science that we don't have the privilege to get to because it hasn't been understood or declassified. And so if you get into that kind of stuff, you can't really look, you don't even know the right questions to ask or how to form them, because we haven't been given the idea that you can form these new questions to this really complicated issue. And so if we can get to that, if we can look at, maybe we can look at Sasquatch as being classified by the Department of Energy instead of like the wildlife department. There's something going on with them on an energy level that could be weaponized to a degree, right? And maybe that's why it's interesting to them. This is a type of like, how do we reproduce what they can do to appear one place and appear another? What's the stuff called infrasound? That's not infrasound. It's more like a psychic spy that can, throw somebody down to their knees. All these things here are possible issues for the government, certainly for weapons of war.
It's got to be what Nikola Tesla was hiding. That's why they got him. That's why they took him out. I know you've heard the Barron Trump time travel thing before. I won't get into that, but like it's see what we did. We went from Bigfoot to Barron Trump. That happened.
Trump's
and it makes perfect sense. We got the most beautiful Bigfoot, very big, very hairy, very stinky,
big, the biggest
stinkiest Bigfoot ever. And on that note, I will let you guys go. Stinky Bigfoot from Trump is. I don't think I can go any. I don't think the rabbit hole gets any deeper without stepping in rabbit shit. So, there's my buddy Kevin. Hey, Kevin.
Just 2 steps.
Yep. Now I kind of want Trump to be president just so he can reveal Bigfoot. You guys, here it is. Beautiful.
There it is.
So, y'all's websites and documentaries, A Flash of Beauty, Paranormal Bigfoot, and A Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed, are in the description. Owl Moon Labs link on Amazon's in the description. Is there anything else I'm missing? Jill, do you have any special projects or charities you want to
tell them what's up, Jill?
Get your cat and dog neutered and fixed. That's my charity statement. But
eating the dogs.
Oh boy. But no, actually this past week we just started filming on A Flash of Beauty 3, which focuses solely on the on Indigenous culture and their experiences and encounters. And we are in the home stretch of Ron Moorhead's Voices in the Wilderness documentary. We should be having that wrapped up soon. And yeah, we have a lot of stuff coming out next year. Just very
I'm
busy.
excited now. When's it coming out? Part 3, if you can tell me.
Well, if we just started this week, we're about a year out.
Oh God.
If we're lucky. This is a major undertaking. Okay. So
I didn't realize you were that new, that green into it. Okay,
we're just out of the gate. Yeah.
I'm excited because y'all do some good work, and I'm not saying it because you're here looking at me. Those things are incredible. There's no, like I said earlier, no Zach Bagany stuff going on. No, what was that?
Oh yeah.
It's just pure.
Bro,
it's like,
bro. You gotta say bro all the time.
Bro. It's raw, uncut Colombian Bigfoot's what it is. It's amazing. Keep up the good work, and tell Brett I want to have him on because I'm making a little documentary about a Bigfoot thing from the 70s that happened about 10 miles up the road. And I just want to talk to a couple documentarians about it. So yeah, I look forward to having him on too.
Sounds
as
good.
He gets better. So you get him better because I need him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Thanks y'all for coming on, and I'll tell Michelle thanks for some good guests. See ya. Thanks everybody for watching as well in the chat. Peace.
Bye, Bobby.
I never didn't believe in Bigfoot. I never believed in it. I didn't believe in it. I never give it any thought.
They kept wood knocking back and forth to each other, and it was in a pattern.
Barn owls don't typically throw rocks.
I come across these tracks.
Sasquatch is still not on my mind.